On the night of October 4th, 2025, a 23-year-old woman walked out of a nursing home in one of Philadelphia's most beautiful neighborhoods. She had been at work for barely 20 minutes. Her coworker heard her on the phone, crying. The last words anyone heard her say were, "I can't believe you're calling me about this." Then she walked toward a dark car in the parking lot and vanished. Her phone went dead 9 minutes later. What investigators would later uncover, the text messages, the surveillance footage, the shallow grave behind an abandoned school, would not only reveal who killed Kada Scott, but expose a justice system that had every chance to stop it and failed. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand what was lost, you need to know who Kada Scott was. She was born in 2002 in Philadelphia's Mount Airy neighborhood, a leafy, diverse, middle-class pocket on the city's northwest side. She was the eldest of 2 children. Her father, Kevin Scott, and her mother, Kim Matthews, raised her in a tight-knit family. People who knew Kata always used the same words: ambitious, creative, kind. She was quiet and observant, the type who would walk into a room and just take everything in before she said a word. But beneath that soft-spoken exterior was a drive that most people twice her age didn't have. Kata graduated from Pennsylvania State University in 2023 with a degree in communications. She had been a cheerleader at Penn State. She loved fashion, designed her own clothing line at one point, and had recently launched a small spa business. She was already thinking about opening a healthcare company. And then, in the summer of 2025, she decided to try something new. She entered the Miss Pennsylvania USA pageant, representing Philadelphia Township. It was her very first pageant. Her father later told reporters that she came home from that experience glowing. She loved it. She wanted to do it again. By September 2025, Kata had started a new job at the Terrace at Chestnut Hill, an upscale assisted living facility tucked inside a 19th-century stone mansion in one of Philadelphia's most affluent neighborhoods. She worked the overnight shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It wasn't glamorous work, but Kata was the kind of person who showed up, did the job, and treated people with dignity. She was a young woman. She lived with her mother. She was building something. And she had no idea that someone had already decided how her story would end. Because in the days before October 4th, Kata told her family something that, in hindsight, should have set off every alarm. Someone was calling her, over and over, and she was afraid. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Kata confided in her family and friends that an unknown person had been harassing her by phone. She didn't go into detail about who it was or what they were saying, but the fear was real. Her family noticed the change. Her father, Kevin, later said she seemed unsettled, not herself. What no one in her family knew at the time was that Kata had been in contact with a 21-year-old man named King. But she didn't know him by that name. King had been texting her through a TextNow number, an anonymous, disposable phone service. He introduced himself as Kel. When Kata replied, "Who dis?" he simply answered Kel. Phone records would later show that between September 28th and October 4th, the two had been exchanging messages through that anonymous number. On the evening of October 4th, Kata left her family's home on the 8300 block of Rodney Street in Germantown. It was around 9:45 p.m. She borrowed her mother's car and headed to work for her overnight shift. She seemed fine, normal, nothing out of the ordinary. She arrived at the Terrace shortly before 10 p.m. and began her shift. Then at 10 o'clock, she received a phone call. 12 calls had come in from the same number between 9:25 and 10:12 that night. One of those calls, she answered. It lasted 43 seconds. Her coworker was standing nearby. She watched Kata take the call and immediately saw the shift. Kata's eyes filled with tears. She looked scared, and then she said those words, "I can't believe you're calling me about this." Prosecutors would later prove that the person on the other end of that call was King. But here is what investigators found when they pulled the full day's messages. That morning, 12 hours before any of this, at 10:07 a.m., Kata had sent King a text. It read, "Kidnap me again." King's reply, "Better be up too." They made plans to meet later that night. Then at 10:09 p.m., just minutes before she walked outside, Kata texted, "Call me when you're here." Now pause here, because those 3 words, "kidnap me again," would become the most debated piece of evidence in this entire case. The defense would later argue that this was flirtatious banter, that Kata and King had plans to meet, maybe for a date. But investigators saw it very differently, because Key and King had done this before. And the last time, it wasn't a game. Here is what the Philadelphia justice system already knew about Key and King before the night of October 4th. In November 2024, King broke into his ex-girlfriend's home in the Strawberry Mansion neighborhood. He tried to strangle her. He was arrested, charged with burglary and strangulation, and released on bail. Then, on January 13, 2025, he came back. This time, surveillance cameras captured him climbing over the fence at the same woman's home. He tried to get inside. An hour later, he returned to the neighborhood, spotted her outside, grabbed her, threw her into a car, and drove away. He choked her inside the vehicle. His 2-year-old child was sitting in the back seat. He eventually let the woman go. She survived. He was charged with kidnapping and strangulation. And this is the part that should make your blood run cold. Prosecutors asked for bail of nearly $1 million. The judge set it at $200,000. King posted $20,000 and walked free. Then the victim stopped showing up to court. She didn't appear at the first hearing. She didn't appear at the second. In May 2025, the charges were withdrawn. The Philadelphia District Attorney's Office would later admit this was a mistake. The entire January attack had been captured on video, surveillance footage, a TikTok video of King lurking outside the woman's house. The case could have moved forward without the victim's testimony. But it didn't. DA Larry Krasner acknowledged it publicly. "We could have done better," he said. And here is something that makes this even worse. In February 2025, King had an active arrest warrant for the January kidnapping. He appeared in court, twice, for the earlier strangulation case. Both times, he sat in front of a judge. Both times, nobody in that courtroom knew he was wanted for kidnapping. There was no system in place to flag it. No one alerted the prosecutor. No one came to arrest him. He walked out of court both times. A free man. Think about that timeline. November, strangulation. January, kidnapping with a child in the car. February, 2 court appearances with an active warrant, and nobody noticed. May, kidnapping charges dropped. 5 months later, Kada Scott was dead. But on the night of October 4th, none of that history mattered. Because at 10:15 p.m., Kada Scott walked out of her workplace, crossed the parking lot, and climbed into a dark-colored vehicle. By 10:24, her phone went silent, and it never came back on. The next morning, Kata didn't come home from her shift. Her mother called the nursing home and got conflicting reports about where her daughter was. Kevin Scott rushed to the terrace and found his daughter's car still sitting in the employee parking lot. Her iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch, keys, all gone. She had taken them with her, but no one could reach her. On October 5th, Kata's family reported her missing.
There are new details tonight in the disappearance of a 23-year-old woman from Philadelphia who has not been seen since Saturday. CBS Philadelphia's Ray Strickland spoke with the family of Kada Scott and police about the latest on their search for her whereabouts.
That's what I fear, that she's not safe, and that's the problem.
Last few days been crazy, head spinning, trying to figure out what's going on.
Police responded quickly. They canvassed the neighborhood, spoke to co-workers, pulled phone records. And immediately, something felt wrong. Captain John Craig told reporters plainly, "You have a 23-year-old young lady who has completely disappeared. No cell phone activity. No social media. We have some concern, more so than usual." Over the following days, the search expanded. Detectives traced Kata's phone signal. The last ping had come from near the Auberry Arboretum, a 55-acre green space in Germantown, about 3 miles from where she was last seen. On October 10th, search teams swept the Arboretum with drones, K9 units, and cadaver dogs. They found nothing. But cell phone data had already given investigators a name, King. His phone had been traveling with Kata's on the night she vanished. And after her phone went dark, his kept moving, making multiple trips between a house on Belmar Terrace and the area around a vacant, abandoned school, the Ada H. Lewis Middle School in East Germantown. On October 9th, 5 days before they even had King in custody, a SWAT team executed a search warrant at a house on the 5500 block of Belmar Terrace. 2 women who lived there, connected to King, were detained and questioned. King wasn't there. But inside the house, investigators found contractor bags, a hammer, gloves, a tablet, phones, and 9mm ammunition. On October 14th, King surrendered to police with his attorney. He was charged with kidnapping. He declined to be interviewed. The next day, investigators went to the grounds of Ada Lewis Middle School. Crime scene units combed the area. They found Kata's bank card, her phone case, and a pair of glasses scattered around the school. But they didn't find Kata. Not yet. Because what the surveillance cameras at the recreation center next door had recorded footage that investigators were now reviewing frame by frame, told a story so methodical, so cold, that even seasoned homicide detectives were shaken by what they saw. Here is what the cameras captured. And I need you to pay attention to the timestamps, because the precision of what happened is part of what makes this so disturbing. October 4th, 10:28 p.m., 4 minutes after Kata's phone went dark, a black Hyundai Accent pulled into the parking lot of the Auberry Recreation Center, directly across from the abandoned school. The car backed into a spot near the playground. A person got out and walked away. That Hyundai had been stolen the night before from a food delivery driver on Sprague Street. Cell phone data placed King's phone in the area where the car was stolen. The Hyundai sat in that parking lot, with whatever was inside it, for more than 30 hours. Then, on the night of October 5th, at 11:39 p.m., a second vehicle arrived. A gold 1999 Toyota Camry, registered to Kian King. Two people got out. They walked toward the playground, past the fence line, toward the abandoned school. They disappeared from camera view. 4 hours later, at 3:56 a.m. on October 6th, the two figures returned. The footage showed them approaching the Hyundai. They opened the car and removed a heavy object, something consistent, investigators said, with a human body. They carried it toward the woods behind the school. They came back half an hour later, empty-handed. On October 7th, at 3:31 a.m., King returned for the Hyundai. He drove it to the 2300 block of 74th Avenue and set it on fire. Firefighters from Engine 73 responded and confirmed it was arson. Police would later recover both vehicles. The Camry was found at the Gypsy Lane condominiums in East Falls after a public tip. Surveillance footage showed a man matching King's description repeatedly accessing the trunk. Then came October 18th. An anonymous caller provided what police described as a very specific tip. Go back to the school. Keep looking. 300 police academy recruits had already combed the area. K-9 units from New Jersey had been brought in. Cadaver dogs had swept the grounds. But the tip was precise enough to bring them back one more time. And this time, in the wooded area behind Ada Lewis Middle School, beneath the brush, along the northeast perimeter of the grounds, they found a shallow grave. Next to it, a silver and gold earring. The next day, DNA confirmed what everyone already feared. It was Kata.
Well, they did find her body. It was certainly the very, very sad news that nobody had hoped would be the outcome, that of 23-year-old Kada Scott.
On October 22nd, the Philadelphia Medical Examiner released the cause of death, a single gunshot wound to the head. Kada Scott had been killed on the night she disappeared. She was 23 years old. Prosecutors charged King with robbery alongside the murder. Kata's iPhone, iPad, and Apple Watch were never recovered. But whether theft was the motive, or something else entirely, remains unanswered. What is known is that King arrived in a stolen car, carried a firearm, and had a documented history of violence against women he knew. The rest, the jury will have to decide. Kian King was charged with murder, robbery, abuse of a corpse, and illegal firearms possession. He is being held without bail. But investigators believe he didn't act alone, because the surveillance footage clearly showed two people carrying that body into the woods. And the question that still hangs over this case is simple. Who was the second person? On November 8, 2025, hundreds of people filled the Mount Airy Church of God in Christ for Kata's funeral. Mayor Sherelle Parker was there. Governor Josh Shapiro was there. Community leaders, Penn State alumni, pageant sisters, all of them came to say goodbye. The mayor told the crowd that she had met Kata after the Miss Pennsylvania pageant. Kata had walked right up to her and introduced herself. Parker was struck by how quickly she followed up afterward, reaching out to the mayor's office, asking about next steps. That kind of initiative at 23. Parker called it a sense of somebodyness. Minister Jenna Allen, one of Kata's Penn State aunties, women who had gone to college with her mother and mentored Kata through the years, told the congregation something that I think captures exactly what was taken. She said, "Violence tried to silence her song. But love doesn't end that way. Even when a candle is blown out, its warmth lingers in the room. On what would have been Kata's 24th birthday, her family launched the Kada Scott Foundation, dedicated to giving young women in Philadelphia the opportunities that their daughter deserved but never got to fulfill. On February 2nd, 2026, King appeared in court for his preliminary hearing. He had transformed his appearance: clean haircut, no dreadlocks, a cardigan, and button-down shirt. The judge allowed his handcuffs to be removed. Kata's family filled one side of the courtroom. When prosecutors showed photographs of the shallow grave, some family members gasped, cried, and left the room. The judge ruled that all charges would be held for trial. King's attorney says he will plead not guilty. As of this recording, King is being held without bail, awaiting trial. I want to leave you with something. King attacked a woman in November 2024. He kidnapped her in January. He appeared in court with an active warrant, and nobody noticed. He posted bail, and nobody tracked him. The victim was too scared to testify, and nobody asked why, or tried to build the case without her, even though video evidence existed. Between May and October 2025, he was a free man. And during that time, he met Kada Scott. That is not just a tragedy. It is a systemic failure. The DA admitted it. Police admitted their systems don't communicate warrants between cases. A judge set bail at a fifth of what prosecutors requested. A violent pattern was visible to anyone who looked, and nobody looked hard enough. None of that absolves King of what he did, but it forces a question that Philadelphia, and every city like it, needs to answer. How many chances does a violent person get before the system stops giving them chances? Kada Scott was 23. She had a degree, a foundation's worth of dreams, and a family that loved her. She deserved to walk out of her job and drive home safely. She deserved more time. The trial of King is pending. If you want to follow this case, subscribe to this channel. I'll cover every development. If this story stayed with you, share it. Because the more people know about cases like Kata's, the harder it becomes for the system to look away.